In this video, we're going to be working on the Contact Us section for our full website build. Now, not only are we going to be building the front end of this form and section, we're also going to be using Firebase and Firestore to go ahead and send our data from the front end over to Firestore on the back end. So if you've never heard of Firebase, simply put, it is a backend as a service and it is free. And I'm not going to go too in depth into what Firebase has to offer beyond using Firestore, and also later on in a few videos we're going to go ahead and deploy this site to Firebase hosting. So if you want to look more into Firebase, I'll go ahead and leave the link down below in the description. They have a bunch of different products, but strictly in this video we're going to be focused on Firestore, and then in a few videos we'll be using Firebase hosting. So now, before we can go ahead and actually begin to work on this section, I want to go ahead and set up our project on Firebase and then import all the stuff we need to go ahead and include in our project from Firebase into our project folder. So let's head over to firebase.google.com and begin to set that up. So here on the Firebase website, the first thing we want to go ahead and make sure is that we are signed into our Google account. Now, once we're signed in, or if you're already signed in, you should see this button to the left of your profile icon that says Go to Console. So we're going to go ahead and click that, which will take us to our Firebase console. Now, as you can see right here, I have a few recent projects as I have used Firebase before. Now, assuming you've never used Firebase, you will not have this, but you will have a box right here that says Add Project. So to begin here, to set up our project, we're going to go ahead and click this. Now, the first step is going to be to create a project name. So for this, I'm going to call this New Biz and then give it the initials of YT for YouTube. Now, you can name this anything you want, but I recommend naming it something relevant to what you are working on. So once we have that, we can go ahead and continue here. Now, it's going to ask you to set up Google Analytics for your Firebase project. We are not going to do this for this project. And then we're going to go ahead and create a project. So this is going to provision and take some time, and once it is done, we'll be able to go ahead and set up the Firestore portion of our project. So I'm going to let this go, and I'll be back with you once it is all complete. Okay, so as you can see, we now have this green check mark saying our project is now ready. So we're going to go ahead and click continue here, and we will be taken to our Firebase console here that has everything that Firebase has to offer. So what we want to do is we want to head over to the left-hand side here of the navigation, and we have an option called Cloud Firestore. So that's what we're going to be using to go ahead and send our data from our form to Firebase is Cloud Firestore. So what we want to do is we want to click Cloud Firestore, and then we need to go ahead and create our database here. So once we click Create Database, we're going to get this pop-up here, and we have two options. By default, it's going to be Start in Production Mode, and then we also have an option to start in test mode. So for the sake of this video, we're going to go ahead and start in test mode, and we're going to go ahead and click next. Now, by default, it'll go ahead and select the best location for your Cloud Firestore. So we're going to be in the US Central. Now, depending on where you are in the world, it will go ahead and pick that for you based on the best available location. So I'm going to keep that as it is, and I'm going to go ahead and click enable. Now, once again, it's going to provision. This will take some time, and once this is all done, we'll be able to go ahead and actually start setting up our Firestore database. Okay, so now that that is done provisioning, you can see we have this message right down here in the box says your database is ready to go, just add data. So we're not going to be adding any data in here. We're actually going to be done in this section for the Firestore portion of it. Now we need a way for our project to communicate with Cloud Firestore, so we need to go ahead and add the Firestore and Firebase library into our project. Now to do that, we're going to go back to the project overview here. And as you can see right here, we have this heading right here. It says get started by adding Firebase to your app, and we want to click on the web version here, or the web icon that looks like a code bracket. So we're going to go and click that, and we need to go ahead and register our app. So the same name I gave our project, I'm going to go ahead and give here. We're going to call this New Biz YouTube, and we will be setting up hosting, but we're not going to be doing it here in this section. So for now, I'm going to leave this blank. We can always set this up later, as it says right here below the message. So we're going to go and register the app, and it's going to give us this Firebase SDK. Now, this actually has the library script tags right here we're going to implement into our project. So the first one we need to go ahead and implement is a script tag right here. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to copy this. I'm going to head back to our index.html and we're going to copy and paste the script tag in. Now we're going to put it right after the style sheet here. So there we go, that's the first one. Now this just imports the entire Firebase library. As you can see right here, we can add SDKs for Firebase products that you want to use. So I'm going to head to this link just to show you where I'm going to get these from. So we're going to create a new tab here. We're going to copy and paste this in, and it's going to take us to the docs. So as you can see, we have a bunch of these libraries right here. I believe we want the yes, we want this right here. So available Firebase JS SDKs reserved from the hosting URL. I think we want this one right here. So for now, we're going to be using this section right here. And as you can see, we have all the Firebase products and all the library references. So we need the Cloud Firestore. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this tag right here, or we can go ahead and copy the code sample. That'll do it. And then we're going to head back to our index.html here, and we're going to copy and paste that in. Okay, so that is all we need to go ahead and do in the head section. Now, as you can see here in the repo, when we got this project, we have a Firebase folder with firebase.js. Now there's one other thing we need to do. So if we go back to our configuration here, we have our script tag here with our var config. Now instead of including this in a script tag, we're going to create this into our own individual JavaScript file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy all the config stuff here. We're going to head back to our firebase.js, and I'm going to simply copy and paste this in. Okay, now one other thing I'm going to do to simplify this for later on is we're going to create a const, and we're going to call this db. Now we're going to set db equal to Firebase, and then we're going to set it equal to a function called Firestore, and then we're going to go ahead and end that. So now when we want to reference the oh, actually, wait a minute. Let's get rid of that. There we go. Okay. We don't need that. So now whenever we want to reference our Firestore database, we can simply go ahead and use this constant. It goes ahead and simplifies, so we don't need to call firebase.firestore every single time. And we'll go ahead and get to that later on in this video. But for now, just remember that we are storing the reference to the Firebase Firestore in a const of db. Now that we have this set up, we need to make sure we have it imported in our index.html. So where we're going to go ahead and import this is we're going to head down to our index.html here, and just above the jQuery that we implemented for our carousel, we're going to go ahead and implement this script tag for our Firebase JS. So we're going to head to the Firebase folder, and we're going to simply go ahead and copy in the firebase.js, and there we go. We have now successfully set up our Firebase project into our own project here. So we are now ready to begin working on this contact us section. All right, to begin, we're going to start with our HTML. So let's go ahead and open up a comment here, and we're going to say contact, and we're going to say us. All right, then let's go ahead and open up our section tag down below that, and we're going to give this a class of contact us as well. Now to begin in our section tag here, we're going to start with a div with a class of container to contain this section. Next up, inside of the container, we're going to have our h2, and this is going to say contact us. And below this, we're actually going to have a paragraph tag with a summary about our contact us form. So as you can see right here, we're going to have this text that says, want to work with us on a future project, fill out the form below to get started. So I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste that in there. And that's going to be it for the content and the heading for this section. Now we want to work on the form. So to create a form, we're going to use the form tag here, and we're going to give this a class of contact-form. Now we actually don't need an action for this, because how we're going to be submitting the data, we're going to do it a different way, so we're not going to need an action there. Now inside of our form, we're going to have a flex row here for our name and email, and then the rest of them will just take up the full width of the space available. So what we're going to do is for those two sections here, or these two inputs, your name and email, we're going to go ahead and put those in a flex row. So we're going to say div.flexRow, and inside of here, we're going to go ahead and create an input. Now we're going to keep it, we're going to change it from a type text to a type of search. Now the reason why I do this is because if we don't do that, the autofill feature goes ahead and is implemented. I tried, using the autocomplete, I think it's like autofill off is one of the tags you can use, or autocomplete and setting it to is it either none or off, but that just doesn't seem to do the trick. The easiest way I found to do it is change the type to search, and then that autofill doesn't actually occur. Okay, and the reason I do this is for aesthetic purposes. I don't like having those autofill features from Chrome populate in my form. It just makes it look a little, not as good in my opinion. So that's why I do that. Next up, we're going to give this a class, and we're going to call this full dash name. And then we want to give this a placeholder of your name. Okay, and then I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste this down because we need one more. And they're going to keep it as a type of search. We're going to call this email. We're going to give it a class of email, actually email address. So we'll do email dash address, and then we're going to say your email for the placeholder. All right, so now for the rest of the inputs, we don't need them in a flex row, so we're just going to go ahead and throw them inside the form. So right below the div flex row, we're going to create another input. It's going to be a type of, let's see here, search again. And I probably could have copied and pasted that one more time, but that's okay. We're going to give this a class of subject. We're going to give this a placeholder of then subject. All right, and that's going to be our last input. Next up, we're going to have a text area. And we don't need any of the rows or columns. We're going to go ahead and set that all in the CSS. And I don't believe we need a name or ID. So the only thing we're going to add here is a class. And we're going to say message. And then we need to go ahead and give this a placeholder of message. Or we're going to say, message. There we go. Okay, now below the text area here, we're going to go ahead and create a button. Now this is what we're going to be using to submit our form data over to Firebase. So we're going to give this a class of button. Now this is one of the utility classes we already created, so the button should already be styled once we go to take a look at this. And we're going to go ahead and give this a type of submit. And then for the value, or what we want the text to be in this button, we're going to have it say send message. All right. And that is going to be our HTML for this section. So let's head over to our file here and see how it looks. And as you can see right now, we need to do some styling on everything here. So with that being said, let's head over to our style sheet and begin to work on that. So to get started, we're going to begin with a comment here, and we're going to just have this say contact and us. And then let's go ahead and open up our contact us class here. And then inside of here, we're going to target our H2 and our paragraph tag, and we're going to simply say text align this to the center. Now we want to look at our input, and then we're going to look at our button, and we simply just want to set the display of block to these two selectors. Moving on here, we're going to once again select our input, but also select our text area here and apply some styles to these. So first off, we're going to give these a width of 100% to take up the full width available. We want to set the padding here to 8 pixels on all sides, and then we want to give it a border of 1 pixel, solid, and a color of CED4DA, which is going to be a nice light gray. And then we want to target the selectors on the focus state here, and we simply want to put the outline and set that to none. Okay, so moving on here, we want to individually target our input here. And we want to give these a margin bottom of 16 pixels. And that's going to be it for the individual input here. So next up, we want to take a look at the text area. And we're going to style this up. Let's see if I can type here. So text area, we're going to give this a height of 100%. And we want to put a resize property on here of none. So if we take a look, I want to just quickly go over what the resize property does. So if we look at our menu right now, it looks pretty good. So what the resize property does, if I remove it here, I'll show you. So if I take it off and save it, you can see that now I'm able to go ahead and resize this. Now I don't want users to have the opportunity to do that. It makes It doesn't really affect anything, but I just want to go ahead and remove that ability for that to even happen. So with that resize of none, that goes ahead and turns off that ability. Okay, so we put resize back on here of none. You can see, and if I refresh it here, you can no longer resize this text area, which is what we're looking for. Okay, just wanted to point that out. Excuse me. Next up, we're going to target the form here, and we want to give this a max width of 700 pixels to make it a little bit smaller, and then simply set that margin to 0 auto. All right. Next up, we want to look at our flex row here. So we need to do some styling on the flex row that has our input values in there. So we want to go ahead and set the flex direction to column here for a mobile view, because once it gets to mobile, the row wouldn't make sense. And then we're going to open up a media query here, and we're going to say a min width of 500 pixels. This is when I found out it looked the best to go ahead and put it back to a row. So we're going to say flex direction to a row at a min width of 500 pixels. And then we want to add a gap here on 500 or larger of 32 pixels in between each one of our input values here. Okay, so it's starting to come together, looking great. Now what we need to go ahead and do here is we need to work on our buttons. So below the flex row, we can target our button, which is already a utility class, and make some changes. So I believe we just need to add a margin top here of 16 pixels. We want to make the font weight a little less thick, I believe by default it's 600. We want to put that to 400. And then we want to target it on the hover state, because we're going to make a little bit of adjustment to the current hover state. So we're going to say hover here. And we want to change the color of the text to a color of 007 BFF, which is a color we already used here. And then we want to change the border color here to the same thing. Okay, and that is going to do it for the styles here. Let me go ahead and take a look, and it looks like we forgot to put a margin bottom here on the paragraph. So let's go ahead and do that. So right below our H2 and our paragraph styling, let's go ahead and put that there. So we're going to say, what do we put on there? Let me take a look. It looks like let me just take a look here on the inspect. And it looks like we put a margin bottom of, let's see, what is this here? 60 pixels. Okay, I did change some things from the demo here in terms of how we did the HTML to refactor it, so that's probably why that happened. So we're going to say margin bottom here and simply set that to 60 pixels, and that should go ahead and solve our issue. Okay, so last but not least, let me head up to the styling for all of our selectors for the padding, which is going to be, let's see, right here. And we're going to go ahead and put in the contact us, and that should go ahead and fix it. So as you can see, it all looks great, but we still need to go ahead and hook up the submission part of this to where we enter our data and then we submit it to Firebase. But if you recall over here, if we click send message, we have this modal pop up, which we still need to create. So before we go ahead and get into the JavaScript for this section, I thought we would go ahead and code this out as well. So let's go ahead and head back into our HTML, our index.html, and start to work on this modal. So for our modal section to begin here, I'm going to go ahead and start by collapsing the section class here to save some space for our contact us. And then we're going to head all the way to the top of our body tag here. And this is where we're going to go ahead and create this modal. So I'm going to begin by giving this a comment of contact modal. And then let's go ahead and begin with our markup here. So to start, we're going to have a div with a class of modal-wrap. And then we also want to give this a secondary class of display none. Now, we haven't created this class just yet. Now, the reason why we want to have this display none initially is because we don't want this modal present when someone loads up the site. We only want this to be present when someone goes ahead and does a form submission on the contact us section. Okay, so once we go ahead and actually add this class of display none, it will not show, but when we go ahead and first render out this HTML, you will see it on the page. Okay. Now, inside of our modal wrap here, we want to create another div with a class of modal. This is going to house the modal content. And inside of this modal, we're going to start with an image here. And we're going to go to the image folder, and we're going to select the image of contact thank you SVG. Then we want to do some paragraph text here. And this is, the first one's going to say, thank you for your submission with an exclamation point, and then the second paragraph tag is going to say, we will be back in touch in 24 to 48 hours. Okay, and then finally we need to go ahead and add our button tag here. Now we're going to give this a class of btn and modal close, and for the text of this button we're going to have it say close, and that is going to be our simple markup for our modal. Now if we go ahead and take a look here, it will be at the very top. So let's go ahead and begin to work on fixing this, because we obviously don't want it here at the top. So to keep things in order with how we have our markup for HTML, I'm going to do the styling for the modal right above the navigation styling here in our style sheet. So to begin, let's go ahead and do a comment of modal here, and let's go ahead and start by targeting our modal wrap. Okay, so we want to display this as flex. We want to justify the content within the modal wrap to the center and also align those to the center. So both vertically and horizontally, the modal content will be in the center. We then want to position this modal wrap as fixed, because we don't want it at the very top. So once we do that, you can see here that it gets taken out of the order it's in and it gets positioned fixed to the whole entire document. Okay. Next up, we then want to give this a width of 100% and also a height of 100% to take up the full height and width of the page. Then we want to, let's go ahead and do this above here, set the top of this to 0, so it starts at the very top, and also set the Z index to 4 to make sure it stays on top of everything. And then finally, we're going to go ahead and give this a background color of RGBA, and we're going to use black with an opacity of 50%. So if we take a look now, you'll see that everything is centered vertically and horizontally. We have this nice black background on top of everything, and we're able to still scroll through the entire web page, which is what we are wanting to do. Okay, so let's work on actually styling up our modal content here. So inside of the modal wrap, we're going to target the modal class here, and we want to text align everything to the center. We want to give this a padding of 8 pixels on all the sides, or sorry, not 8 pixels. We want to do 50. That's for the border radius. We're going to give this a border radius of 8 pixels. And then let's go ahead and give it a background color of white. Okay, so if we do this, you'll see that now the modal content is white, but it's taking up a lot of room, and that's because we have to go ahead and set a width property here on our image. So let's go ahead and take care of that. Now let's go ahead and nest this inside of here, and we're going to say image and give this a width of 200 pixels, a height of auto, and then we want to give this a margin bottom of 16 pixels to go ahead and separate it from the content here of thank you, and we'll be back in touch soon. So now if we do that, you'll see that it looks 10 times better. It's a lot smaller and looks more proportionate to our actual modal here. Okay, so next up, we want to target this paragraph tag here. So we're going to use a pseudo selector again, and we're going to select the P tag, and we're going to say nth child, and we're going to select 2. Now for this one, we want to give it a font size of 24 pixels, and then we want to give it a margin bottom of 8 to separate it a little bit from this paragraph tag right here. So margin bottom 8 pixels. Okay, now if we save that, you'll see that we have the thank you for submission is a little bit larger than the text down here, because this is mainly supposed to be our heading. Now let's go ahead and fix our button here, because on hover you can see it turns to white, which is what we don't want. So what we can do is we can say btn like we did in the previous section with the contact form, and we're going to start by giving this a margin top of 24 pixels to separate it from our paragraph tag, and we only need to fix the hover state. So we're going to say on hover. We want to change the border color to 007 BFF, and then we also want to change the text color to the same thing, and there we go. That is going to be all the CSS and styling for our modal. So now if we head over to our page, you should see it looks exactly as we have on our demo. Now, the one thing we need to do is we still need to go ahead and have this be not displaying when the page first loads up. So if I refresh it here, this is still on. Now the reason that is is because we never went ahead and set up our display none class here. So where I'm going to do that is down here in our utility classes, just below container. Let's go ahead and set up a display none and set this to display none. So now if we head back over to our page, you should no longer see the modal by default. So that is going to give you an idea how we're going to toggle the modal on and off when someone submits a form. So we're going to say after the form has been submitted, we want to then take off this display none class by simply using JavaScript, and I'll go ahead and do it manually here. So then once they go ahead and submit the form, they'll be presented with this. Now to close it, we're going to hook up an event listener here to our close button, and when we close it, we're going to simply just add that display none class back on, and the modal will disappear. So that is going to be it for the styling for our contact form and our modals. So it's time to go ahead and start working on submitting our form data over to Firebase right here. And then once that form data is submitted, we want to then show the modal. So that's going to be all done using JavaScript. So let's head over to our JavaScript file and get started with that. So to get started, we're going to be doing all of our JavaScript here in the same exact file that we went ahead and did our owl carousel configuration, which is going to be in our main.js. So to begin here, let's go ahead and skip a few lines and go ahead and throw a comment down and just say contact data. Okay, now to start off, I just want to mention that I did add this class of submit form to our button here because we need to get a reference to this button to know when a user clicks on it, so that we can go ahead and perform the submission over to Firebase. So the easiest way to do that is to put a secondary class on here, and we went ahead and gave that submit-form. So speaking of getting references to our data, we need to go ahead and get references to more than just our submit form. We need to go ahead and get a reference to our contact form here. We also need to get a reference to all of our input values because we need to obtain the values that a user will enter into those fields and send them over to Firebase, as well as get a few references here from our modals. So let's go ahead and begin with that. So to do that, we go ahead and create a constant here, and we're going to start with our contact form. So we're going to go ahead and call this constant contact form. And I'm going to camel case it here. And how we can get a reference is by doing a document.query selector, which is a method, and it goes ahead and it accepts a value here, and we pass it in the class name of what we're trying to target. So in this example, we want to get a reference to our form, which has a class of contact form. So let's go ahead and pass in contact-form. Okay, and now we have a reference to our contact form in here within our JavaScript file. So this is pretty repetitive, so I'm going to copy and paste in the additional ones here, and I'll go through them. So next up, we have our full name, which is going to grab the input that has the class of full name. We have our email address, which is right here. Our subject, which is our subject from our input, and then our message. So it's all pretty straightforward and pretty repetitive. Then next up, we have our submit button here, which is our submit button on our form. And then we have two classes from our modal, which is the modal wrap, which is this right here, what we went ahead and created. And then we also have a reference to our modal close button. Okay, now to begin, we need to figure out when a user goes ahead and clicks on the submit button here on the form. So when they do that, we want to send their data over to Firebase, or Firestore, I should say. Okay, so what we can do is we want to listen to a click on the submit button. So we're going to say submit and then add an event listener. And we're going to pass in the click because we want to hear when a user clicks on that button. And then we want to run some code once they go ahead and do that. So I'm also going to pass in the event parameter here because if we go ahead and click on this form as of right now, it will refresh the page, and we don't want that because then the data will not send. So one easy way to prevent that is by using the event property here and just saying prevent default, which is a method, and then go ahead and save that. And now when we click on it, we should not see this refresh anymore because it's preventing the default action from happening, which is great. Okay, so now we need to go ahead and get our data and send it over to Firebase. So how we do that is, since we went ahead and imported the Firebase library into our project, we now have the ability to use the library. So how we go ahead and send our data over to Firebase is by first we go ahead and say db, not debugger, we say db. So where we're getting this from, if you guys don't remember, in the previous video, we set up a const or not previous video, in the previous section of this video, I should say, we set up a const of db, which is set equal to firebase.firestore. So that's where I'm getting that from, okay? Then we want to pass in the value of .collection. Now, we don't have a collection set up as of right now. If we go over to our Firestore console here, you can see that it's completely empty. We can go ahead and start a new collection and give it a name, but the easiest way that I like to do it is by simply referencing the collection name we have or want to give it here in the code. And if Firestore doesn't have that collection already created, it will go ahead and create it for you. So that's what we're going to do. So we're going to call this collection of data contact-form. Now, after this, so it's going to reference that collection, which it doesn't have, so it's going to create it. Now, we want to create a new document inside of that collection. So how we do that is by passing it .doc, and then that creates a new document, okay? Then we want to go ahead and set the information in that document. So we use the set method here, and then we can pass it an object here and pass it the data we want to go ahead and set within that document. So we want to set the full name, so we're going to go ahead and say full name, and then we want to get the full name dot value, which is not node value dot value, and we're going to pass a comma here. So where we're getting this from is we have a reference to full name up here, which we got from the query selector, and then we simply want to just get the value of whatever is in that class or that input. So how we do that is by saying full name dot value. And that's pretty much how we're going to set the data, is exactly like this. Okay, so next up we want to get the email, so we're going to call this email, and we're going to say email address dot value. And then for the subject, we're going to say subject, and then say subject, not submit, we're going to say subject dot value. And then finally, you want to go ahead and grab the message, okay? So we're going to say message, and then message dot value, okay? And that's going to be it. Now, when this is done, it will return a promise. So what we're saying here is when we click submit, we want to prevent the default action from happening. Then we want to reference the collection of contact form, create a new document, and set that document to this data right here. So that's going to return a promise once it's all done. So we can tack on a then method here, and then we can pass in another function here. We don't need a parameter, and we're going to say we want to then reference our contact form and reset that data to go ahead and remove it. So we can do this by passing it the reset method here. And why does it keep auto filling in for me? So we want to use contact form dot reset here. I don't know why does it keep doing that? All right, let's try this again. Reset. Oh my gosh. Okay, we're going to try this by not even doing that. So reset. Okay, we're going to leave it like that. I don't know why it's doing that. So we can go ahead and reset this by saying contact form dot reset. All right. Now we want to go ahead and then open up our modal, because at this point in time, this data has been set to Firebase. It has passed. Now we want to say we got your data, or we got your submission. We'll be back with you soon. So how we can do that is by referencing the modal class or the modal selector we have up here, and then just saying class list, and then toggle. And we want to toggle that display none. So we're going to say display and none. Okay. And that's going to be our simple way of sending our data over to Firebase. Now, one other thing we need to do is we need to have a way to close out that modal. So we're going to say the same thing here. So we want to reference the closed class, which are the closed constant we have up here. And we want to add an event listener here. And we're going to do a click as well. And then we want to pass another arrow function here. And inside this arrow function, we're just simply going to copy and paste this code right here. So with this being said, we should be able to fill out our form, submit it, the form will reset, and then our modal will display. And then when we're done reading it, we can go ahead and close out the modal. So let's go ahead and test this out. Let's start by typing out our name here. So John Komarnicki, and then we're going to say our email is john@johnkomarnicki.com. And then let's go ahead and put a subject here of testing and then a message of testing. Now, we're not doing any validation on this form. If you want to go ahead and challenge yourself, I would recommend trying to go ahead and use JavaScript to throw some validation on here. I'm not going to go ahead and do that in this video though. So Now that our data is in here, let me go ahead and inspect this so you can see what happens here in the console when we go ahead and click send message. So I'm going to go ahead and click send. So you can see the data was posted over here to Firestore. Then our form was reset. As you can see, all the values are empty. And then we have our modal here saying, thank you for your submission. We will be back in touch in 24 to 48 hours. And if I click close, the modal should disappear. And then if we head over to Firestore, if I refresh this, you should see a collection here of contact form. And you should have all of our data here that we went ahead and submitted on the front end of our website. So that is going to do it for this section. Next up, we're going to actually be working on the last part of the website, which is the footer. And then after that, we have to go ahead and finish up by doing our mobile navigation. And then we're actually going to head back over to Firebase to go ahead and deploy this, and that will go ahead and do it for the project. So we'll get to all of that in the next video.